Imagine that the week your daughter turns 10, a billionaire you've never met picks her for the first permanent settlement on Mars. Children adapt better to the low gravity, he explains. So he's recruiting kids, and all her friends have already signed up. You read the fine print. No shield against the radiation. Bones and eyes and hearts that may deform in gravity a third of Earth's. No research on whether a child raised up there could ever come home. And to launch her, the company needs just one thing, a checked box saying you agreed. Would you let her go? Of course not. It's insane. So why does psychologist Jonathan Haidt say we already did? No rocket ever came for our children. But around the year 2000, a handful of West Coast companies built something that reached them anyway. The products were dazzling. They made adult life easier, funnier, more connected. And then, quietly, they began reshaping childhood too. Haidt watched it happen in his own home. In 2008, his 2-year-old son mastered the swipe of his first iPhone. Parents everywhere felt the same relief. A screen could keep a child happy and silent for hours. Was it safe? Nobody knew, but everyone else was doing it, so everyone assumed it must be fine. And the law barely blinked. A rule from 1998 quietly set the age of internet adulthood at 13, but no company ever has to check. A kid just ticks a box swearing she's old enough, and the door swings open. Today, roughly 4 in 10 American children under 13 are already on Instagram. No one checked. No one asked permission. And that, Haidt argues, is exactly how we sent a whole generation to Mars. Then look at what happened to the kids. For decades, teen mental health held roughly steady. Around 2012, the line snapped upward and kept climbing. Anxiety, depression, self-harm, all rising at once, and rising hardest for girls. Rates of teen depression didn't creep up. They roughly doubled. Haidt tells it through a girl he calls Emily, 14, in Boston, spiraling as her life moved onto Instagram. Her parents were terrified. Then they sent her to a summer camp with no phones allowed, and within weeks the daughter they remembered came back. The moment she got the phone again, the darkness returned. One girl could be a coincidence, but this was a whole generation bending at the same moment. The question that haunts the book is simple. Why 2012? Haidt's answer isn't just phones. It's 2 mistakes we made at the same time, pulling in opposite directions. In the real world, we became terrified. Starting in the 1980s, we decided a child walking to school alone would be snatched by a stranger. So we locked the doors, canceled the roaming, supervised every hour. We overprotected them. And in the virtual world, we did the reverse. We handed a 9-year-old a device that opened onto the entire internet. Strangers, adult content, endless comparison, and we barely looked. We underprotected them. Safe from every small risk that would have helped them grow. Exposed to every large one that could hurt them. That inversion, Haidt argues, is why the children born after 1995 became the anxious generation. But to feel the damage, you first have to see what we took away. Here's the thing about children. They're not fragile. They're built to be strengthened by challenge, the way a bone gets denser when you stress it. Across every mammal species, the young do one thing obsessively. They play. Not because it's cute, but because it's how the brain wires itself. The scrapes, the arguments, the tumbling risk of unsupervised play are a kind of inoculation. Small doses of fear and failure that teach a child, I can handle this. Fall out of the tree, negotiate the rules, make up after the fight. That's the curriculum. Take that away, and you don't get a safer child. You get a more anxious one, who never learned in small doses what the world feels like. So what happens when we replace the tree with a touchscreen? There's a greenhouse experiment Haidt loves. Scientists grew trees inside a sealed biosphere with perfect light and nutrients, and the trees grew fast, then collapsed under their own weight. What was missing was wind. Without the stress of the wind, they never grew the strong stress wood that lets a tree stand. Children are those trees. Haidt borrows a word for it, anti-fragile. Some things need stress and setback to grow strong. He maps it onto 2 settings in the young mind. Discover mode, curious, open, let me try. And defend mode, anxious, guarded, keep me safe. A childhood of real play tunes a kid toward discovery. A childhood of overprotection and Doom scrolling locks them into defense, and a brain stuck on defense is a brain primed for anxiety. Now add timing, because timing is everything. Puberty isn't just a growth spurt for the body, it's a rewiring of the brain. For a few years, the neural pathways are like wet cement. Whatever a child does over and over gets set for life. Which means the question isn't only what a teenager is doing at 13, it's what they're not doing. Haidt calls the smartphone an experience blocker. Like a cuckoo bird's egg dropped into another bird's nest, it shoves everything else out. The sports, the boredom, the fumbling first conversations, and demands to be fed first. So the most sensitive window in a human life, the one built for practicing adulthood, got handed to a device engineered to hold attention. The cement was wet, and we let the phone ride in it. Every traditional culture built a bridge from childhood to adulthood, a rite of passage. A ritual that said, out loud, you are not a child anymore. The vision quest, the ceremony, the season away from home. Separation, ordeal, return. Modern life had already let that bridge crumble. Then the phone-based childhood finished the job. Instead of stepping into wider real-world responsibility at 14, a job, a journey, a trusted task, kids step deeper into their bedrooms, into a screen. The body reaches adulthood on schedule, but the transition, the practice of independence that turns a child into a capable young adult, got blocked. So that's the childhood we quietly dismantled. Now comes what we built to replace it, and it was engineered. So, why 2012? Because a specific machine switched on. The iPhone arrived in 2007, but a phone alone wasn't the trap. The trap assembled itself over a few years. In 2009, the like and retweet buttons appeared, turning every post into a public scoreboard. In 2010, the front-facing camera arrived. In 2012, Facebook bought Instagram, and suddenly millions of teenagers were posting curated photos of their lives, not just to be seen, but to be judged. Haidt marks the years 2010 to 2015 as the Great Rewiring, the window when childhood flipped from play-based to phone-based. By 2015, most teens had a supercomputer in their pocket that called them every waking hour away from the people in the room. And it wasn't an accident that they couldn't look away. One morning in 2016, Haidt's 6-year-old daughter was playing a game on his iPad. She looked up and said something he never forgot. "Daddy, can you take the iPad away from me? I'm trying to take my eyes off it, but I can't." A 6-year-old describing addiction from the inside. Back in 1911, the psychologist Edward Thorndike put cats in puzzle boxes and watched them learn, not by reasoning, he wrote, but by the wearing smooth of a path in the brain. That's the same lever the app designers pull, with rewards that arrive just often enough to keep you pulling. Haidt names 4 ways this rewired childhood does its damage. 4 foundational harms: social deprivation, sleep deprivation, attention fragmentation, and addiction. Line them up, and you see how a childhood gets hollowed out. Start with the first harm, social deprivation. This is the cruel irony of social media. Ask a teenager how much time they spend with friends, and they'll say all day, "We're always connected." But measure the real thing, bodies in the same room, and it fell off a cliff in the early 2010s. The hangouts, the sleepovers, the aimless afternoons, the raw material of friendship got traded for a feed. And a feed is not a friend. Real connection is embodied. You read a face, you feel a silence. You fix a fight because you can't just log off. Scroll past 100 people and you touch none of them. Haidt's word for what a generation lost is exact. They became lonely in a crowd of thousands, and loneliness was only the first cost. Then there's what the phone did to sleep and to attention. Teens need more sleep than adults, not less. But the phone follows them into bed. One more video, one more message at midnight, and quietly steals an hour, a habit, a year of rest. Tired teenagers are anxious, irritable, and sadder. That's harm number 2. Harm number 3 is subtler. Count the interruptions in a teenager's day. The buzzes, the banners, the pull to check. Each one fractures attention into confetti. A mind that is never allowed to hold one thought for long is a mind that struggles to think deeply at all. We didn't just take their time, we shattered their focus into pieces. And the fourth harm is the one that keeps the other three running. The fourth harm is addiction, and it isn't a side effect, it's the business model. These apps are free, which should make you ask who's actually paying. You're not the customer. Your attention is the product being sold. So the machine is tuned relentlessly to hold you. Sean Parker, Facebook's first president, later admitted the design question out loud: how do we consume as much of your time as possible? Give a little dopamine hit, a like, a comment, often enough to keep you coming back. And then he said the quiet part: God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains. For an adult with a finished brain, that's a bad habit. For a teenager in the wet cement years, Haidt argues, it's something closer to a rewiring, and it doesn't hit every child the same way. Meet Alexis Spence. Born in 2002, a bright kid on Long Island. She got her first iPad for Christmas, and at 11, lying about her age because no one checked, she opened Instagram. When her parents grew worried, she hid the app behind a calculator icon on her phone. Then the algorithm went to work. It learned what held her attention and fed her more of it, steering a young girl from ordinary posts toward darker and darker corners about her body and her worth. The spiral cost her years and her health. Haidt tells her story carefully, and so will we. The point is not the detail, but the pattern. Alexis and her family later took that pattern to court, suing the platform. Because what happened to her, Haidt argues, wasn't bad luck. For girls, it was almost by design. So why girls, and why so hard? Haidt gives 4 reasons, and none of them are girls are fragile. 1. Girls live more in a visual world of comparison, and a feed of filtered, perfected images is a comparison machine that never turns off. We each carry an inner gauge of how we're measuring up, and social media jams the gauge on not enough. 2. Where boys' aggression tends to be physical, girls can be relational, and social media is a weapon perfectly built for exclusion and reputation. 3. Emotions and even disorders spread faster girl to girl, and a platform can turn private pain into a contagion. 4. It opened a door to harassment and predation from adult strangers. 4 currents, all pulling the same direction. Girls on social media for hours a day were roughly 3 times as likely to be depressed. Haidt is careful here, and so are we. He admits the science is still argued over, that a few studies find no effect, and that he may be wrong on some points. But he lays out his case, the timing, the dose, the experiments, and asks you to weigh it. And if the wave hit girls first, it didn't spare the boys, it just pulled them somewhere else. The boys mostly didn't drown in comparison. They drifted into video games and online worlds and adult content, into a room that asked nothing hard of them. Haidt hired a young man he calls Chris to help finish the book, and Chris described his own generation from the inside. Games and adult content had filled his days for years, and he put the emptiness into one haunting line: I often feel like a hollow operating system. It's a push and a pull, Haidt says. The real world grew less inviting for boys. School, work, and dating all got harder to break into. And the virtual world grew more inviting, endless, frictionless, always a win one click away. So a rising number of young men simply withdrew, present in body, checked out of life. Failure to launch, we call it. And to see the full cost, Haidt says, you have to look higher than the mind. Here's a turn you won't expect from a scientist. Haidt, an atheist, says the phone doesn't just harm the mind. It flattens something he can only call the spiritual dimension of a life. He points to 6 ancient human practices, the things that lift us out of our own small, buzzing selves. Sharing a moment of collective awe, moving and eating and singing together, in a body, in a group, sitting in stillness, being slow to anger and quick to forgive, and a phone, always pulling you back to the self and the scroll, quietly starves all of them. The result isn't only sadness, it's a kind of thinness, a life lived at a distance from the people right in front of you. And the antidote, he says, might be as close as the nearest patch of sky. Haidt sends a student, he calls her Yi Mei, on an experiment psychologists call an awe walk. The instruction is almost nothing. Go outside, put the phone away, and let yourself be amazed by something. She walks through a city park she'd crossed 100 times with her head down. This time she looks up, at a tree older than the country, at light through the leaves, at strangers' faces she'd never really seen. And she comes back changed, lighter, more herself. Nothing happened. Everything happened. That's the whole book in a single walk. What the phone steals isn't dramatic. It's the raised head, the real face, the quiet minute where a person remembers they're alive. So if the damage is this deep, why can't we just take the phones away? Because Haidt says no parent can win this alone. Picture a lake where every family fishes. If one family holds back to let the fish recover, they just go hungry while everyone else keeps hauling. Only if they all agree to fish less does anyone win. Scientists call it a collective action problem. That's the phone trap. Exactly. Try to be the one parent who says no smartphone, and your child isn't protected. They're isolated. The only kid not in the group chat, not in the game, not invited. The cost of acting alone is so high that almost no one can. Which is why just take away the phone quietly fails, and why parents feel so powerless. The problem was never a lack of willpower. It was a trap built for individuals. And the only way out of a trap like that is to stop acting like individuals. So Haidt hands us a key. Haidt's solution is 4 simple norms: cheap, doable, and powerful, precisely because we do them together. 1. No smartphone before high school. Give younger kids a basic phone that calls and texts, and keep the pocket internet out until around 14. 2. No social media before 16. Let the wet cement years of the brain finish before plugging a child into the fire hose of comparison. These aren't the same rule, and the ages aren't arbitrary. They track how a young brain actually matures. The magic is in the word together. If most families in a school hold the same line, no child is the odd one out. The isolation that made saying no impossible simply disappears. 2 norms down. The next one belongs to schools. The 3rd norm: phone-free schools, and Haidt means truly phone-free, locked away from the first bell to the last, not just put it in your pocket during class. He tells the story of a middle school in Durango, Colorado, that went phone-free back in 2012. The principal describes walking into schools that haven't. It's kind of like the zombie apocalypse. All these kids in the hallways, not talking to each other. In his own school, the silence broke. Kids talked again in the corridors. They looked up, and within a few years, the test scores climbed to the top of the state. Give teachers back the attention of the room, and the room comes alive. It costs almost nothing. It works. And the 4th norm sends kids somewhere the phone can't follow. The 4th norm is the oldest one. Far more free, unsupervised play and real independence. Send kids back out into the world we locked them out of, to roam, to take small risks, to solve their own problems without an adult hovering. And notice, this one costs nothing and needs no permission from any company. It's the direct cure for the overprotection that started the whole story. Because make no mistake about who built the trap. The insiders knew. One design ethicist called it a race to the bottom of the brainstem. A whistleblower's documents showed a platform studying how to reach ever younger kids. Haidt himself once made a fake account as a 13-year-old to prove no one was checking a child's age at the door. They knew, which means we can no longer say we didn't. There's a famous experiment Haidt leaves us with. People sit filling out a form when smoke starts seeping under the door. Alone, almost everyone gets up and reports it. But put them in a group where no one else reacts, and most just sit there, glancing around, breathing the smoke, waiting for someone else to move first. That's us. The room is filling, and we're all waiting for another parent to act. So Haidt's ask is only 2 words. Speak up. Say out loud to other parents that you're worried too, and you'll find you're not alone. And link up, because these norms only work as a we. Gen Z, he insists, isn't in denial. They can see the smoke better than anyone, and they're ready to open the windows. The fix was never a gadget. It was a decision to stop waiting. So come back to that little girl, the one the billionaire wanted to send to Mars. You said no without a second thought, because a parent knows a child is not built for that world. Haidt's argument is that we sent a whole generation there anyway, not to a red planet, but to a virtual one. Thrilling, addictive, and no place to grow up. Their bodies stayed here. Their childhoods drifted off into orbit. But Mars was never a life sentence. The way back is the world we already have. The tree, the friend, the raised head, the ordinary afternoon with nothing to prove. Let children grow up on Earth first. That's the whole of it. As Haidt closes the book, it's time to end the experiment and bring our children home.